recording with Dr. Carol Lieberman on Sunday, March 19th, 2023 at 5:03 p.m. Eastern Time. And guys, as always, if you want to support the show, click the little red button above on Rumble. For locals, for like a couple bucks a month, you can support the show, exclusive stuff, all that, whatever. No one cares. So I was just telling Dr. Lieberman beforehand, as of everyone that watches this show knows, still kind of reeling from the worst panic attack of my life. And you so beautifully said that that's not entirely off topic, that a lot of people are feeling anxiety right now. And as a side note, in the descriptions, your Twitter and your podcast, and I think you have the best name ever for a podcast, The Terrorist Therapist. That's incredible. But
Thank you.
Dr. Lieberman, could you please introduce yourself to my audience?
Sure. Well, let's see. Okay, I'm a psychiatrist, a Beverly Hills psychiatrist, but I was born and bred in New York City. You know, talking about the terrorist therapist, after 9/11, I decided that I thought the thing that I could do the most to help people, of course, that's before life got even crazier in America, right? With cancel culture and everything else that we're going through. But anyhow, is terrorism. And so I have been since then. I wrote 2 books on terrorism. I do this podcast, the Terrorist Therapist Show. And I've done all kinds of like speaking engagements and just all kinds of things to try to help people cope with living in a world, not just with the 9/11, but with living in a world where there is still this terrorist threat. And, it's so interesting. Lately in the news, there has been a lot of news about terrorists, the action that terrorists are taking. I mean, I say on my podcast oftentimes, the terrorists have not gone away. They have, just because we're not thinking about them anymore, especially with the pandemic and so on. They were using that time to build themselves up, to recruit and all of that, because so many people were online. And so they are, and now, of course, we left all our equipment in Afghanistan. So we are in more danger now than before 9/11, and in a lot of different ways. I won't go off on a tangent of this, but you just mentioned, when I think about telling about myself, it starts in New York. I trained at NYU Bellevue and also in London at Anna Freud's clinic. Besides seeing patients, I am a forensic psychiatrist and expert witness, and I, with civil and criminal cases, and I do a lot of television and radio and talk. My passion is talking about things that we are all facing in the world, and how we can see it in a light that we can cope with these things better. And what else? And I've written 4 books, 2 on terrorism and 2 on relationships. I'm also working on, one of these days it's going to be finished, working on a book about my stint as the defense psychiatrist for Jonathan Schmitz in the Jenny Jones talk show murder trial. I don't know if you remember that. It was a while ago, but it is still sort of the most intriguing of all my cases. In all these years, that is still the most intriguing case. So anyhow, I don't want to go on just talking about me.
No, please. I've done 1143 episodes. People have heard enough about me. It's dawning on me more and more. I'm like, hey, they're here for the guest, not for me. To kind of pick up on one of the things you said, in what way would individuals shift the light in which we're viewing the world, and how would one cope with it? I mean, we are in a seemingly insane world, be it World War III is on, right around the corner, or coming out of a pandemic, or with every passing day, it seems that the gap between the schism of the left and the right in the United States is growing, and that there's a failed state to our south, that there's a belligerent China teaming up with, I mean, what is it? Is it a sane response to be a bit on edge?
Yes, that's the thing. It really is. Because if you could look at the news, every morning I get up and I look at certain news sites, and I see these things that are just unbelievable. It's like, if you would write this in a script, you would never get the script made because people would say that this is impossible, this could never happen. And in fact, more and more of these things that could never happen are happening. I mean, today, for example, there was an article in the Daily Mail about a hospital in New York. You know, it's so interesting. In the Daily Mail, I don't know if you read that regularly, but they
I'm
talk about
familiar
things.
with it.
They talk about things that that you don't see in American. I mean, besides the mainstream, you know, and of course Breitbart, you get to see the truth and all that. But you know, you like this story as an example was about a hospital in Manhattan, where the emergency room, you know, there was someone brought their mother into the emergency room, and so they took pictures of it. And it was just unbelievable. Not only were there more patients than could fit in the rooms and so on, but there was urine on the floor, you know, urine sample trays, or you know, the all kinds of
Pans.
disgusting things that in a hospital, you know, it's bad enough we see this in our streets, right? But in a hospital. And so I had to tweet that. You know, I feel like I start my day by trying to help people right away by drawing attention to some of these crazy things. And so, you know, I wrote something about how this was foreseeable because, you know, with the open border on the south, and doctors and nurses quitting, and people in general just having more uncivilized behavior. But, you know, you look at something like that and how do you go about your day realizing, I mean, so I wrote something about warning, do not get sick. Because I mean, think about that, you know, if you have to, if God forbid, you know, and eventually probably most of us will have to go to a hospital for something. And you go into the emergency room, it's like more upsetting, more scary, more dangerous than whatever it is that you could be suffering from that would need you to make you go into the hospital. So you see this, and this isn't just in that hospital. I mean, it turned out that the reporter was related in a way, or knew in a way, the woman who brought her mother in, and so that's how he got this report. But you know, this is happening all over, and so how do you go on in a sane way when you know that these horrible things are happening? And that's the question you ask me. So so what's the answer? The answer is the only way to live in this world where there are all these kinds of you know, crazy things happening, pronouns, transgender, critical race theory, you know, on and on and on, is to do something about it, is to do what you can do to try to fix these things, or to try to help the people who are being most affected by these things. Because action, in other words, is the antidote to just, you know, going to bed and pulling the covers over your head.
No, and that's kind of, it's the correct answer, and it's the answer that I hate because I know deep down it's correct. Is like today I woke up and was just, the second I opened my eyes was just, I could tell I was anxious, and all you want to do is roll back over, pull the sheets up, and I'm not here. But I know that deep down the only thing that makes it feel better is to get up and start moving, start the laundry, start the dishwasher, come into the studio, make sure all the lights are working, check the emails. All right, we're doing this, send out the Zoom invites, make the thumbnail, make the description. Okay, go to the gym, come back. And all the while, I hate every second of it because all I want to do is be in bed and close my eyes. But even now, I'm not entirely through the day, and I'm still a little off. But I know that around 8 or 9 p.m. after a full day of working, and adding, this podcast is my business, it is my revenue source. By working towards this thing and working on myself, meditating, going to the gym, reading, I will feel better. And it is the worst answer because it means that you're not allowed to stay in bed and do nothing. But action really is the only thing that in the long term starts to make it feel better. And it's a tough thing to do because you do just want to roll over and pull the covers up.
Yes, and of course, you know, I mean, you can feel better by what you're doing with this podcast in terms of trying to right some of these wrongs. And that's what it used to be when I started out. I've been doing media for ages, and it's when I started out, I used to do things like like I had this column in the National Enquirer just to be as an example. Actually, I started out in the National Examiner. I was promoted to the National Enquirer, and I did a column about the media. It was about, well, in the Enquirer it was called what was it called? Hollywood on the Couch, or that was the Examiner. Anyway, I analyzed in both of them. The gist of it was I analyzed either the Hollywood in general, or in the Enquirer it was about particular people who were being featured in the Enquirer. And I would analyze them. I did all kinds of research on their background and so on, and why they're now doing this crazy, stupid thing that they're doing. But after a while, and then other things like my first two of my books are about relationships. So it was kind of general psychological stuff. But for about the last 5 years at least, well, certainly terrorism since 9/11, obviously, that was a major thing. But also in about the last 5 years or so, since our country started getting so crazy, I have been especially dedicating myself to talking about these things that are taking America, stealing America, taking America away from us and away from traditional values and so on. And that is the key thing that we all have to, everybody, there's something that everybody can do. Maybe not everybody can have a podcast, but there is something that certainly that everybody can do in their way to try to fight back, against what is happening in our world.
And there is something kind of symbolic about, right? There's something about, I think we're all familiar with anxiety, and there is almost this threshold, this gradient on the slippery slope where you can tell it's turning into panic. And there is, like, you can do something. You can note it. You go, okay, this is scary, this is happening. How do we keep it at this level? How do we just not let it slip into, and the first thing you do is you go, you can't be helpless. You have to say, we're going to do some stuff today. We're going to get moving. We're going to clean the apartment. We're going to whatever, pay the bills, answer the emails. We're going to do some stuff. You acknowledge that it currently sucks, that you feel a little on edge, and you go, but we're not gonna let this get away from us and go, oh my God, I'm all alone. How am I going to fix it? I'm not. Oh, that's, you're kind of at a game over. There is some similarities in to what they used to call, what we would now call a depression or recession, but there were runs on the banks, or also like the panic of 19 whatever, the panic of 18 whatever. There is that on sort of a larger meta scale of a panic of when rational thought goes out the window and you are the cornered animal and you are going to get yours or you're going to die trying. Is there any similarities, or is it just semantics in something like a rush on the bank that we're seeing with, or we saw with SVB or Signature?
Well, the problem is that we are so overloaded with things that are, as I was saying, sort of unbelievable things that we have to cope with in a general sense in the world, in addition to whatever problems we individually have. A relationship breaks up, or somebody is sick in your family, or something like that. But on the larger scale, there is just one stress after another. Now, the banks, of course, is the current great example. And I think when you think of a run on a bank or banks, which is people go to the banks and try to take their money out because they're scared that the money is going to be taken away from them. And it's certainly reasonable to be scared of that. But we can't, if we each give in to our panic and make a run on the bank, then it really is going to be a disaster. So we have to have a little self-control here. It's kind of like the movie It's a Wonderful Life. You know that movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where everybody makes a run on the bank, but then the hero of the story, people come and give him, and he has a small bank compared to the other bank. And so and there's something that happens where they lose somebody loses the money from their bank, at least, and the bad guy takes it. But what happens is the people in the village who love George, the hero, come and bring as much money as they have, and it turns out to be even more than enough, and so on. And then someone says, you are the richest man in town, meaning not just about money, but about how everyone, cares about him, loves him. Everyone wants to pitch in. So that is kind of it would be nice if we all could adopt that sort of feeling of wanting to help each other rather than the run on the bank for each of us, doing our own thing, trying to save our own skin. Now, that being said, yes, this is a good time to take stock of all your assets. I am not a financial expert by any means, but it would be good to keep track of how much you have where, and other assets that you might have, and to realize that to think about, well, first of all, to think about how really the best things in life are free. That's not just a corny phrase, but no matter what, there is nature and art and music and all kinds of friends and family and so on. And maybe we put too much, a lot of us do put too much emphasis on money, making money and all of that. So, it's a good sort of adjustment, a balancing act that we might want to do. Some people are more vulnerable to this panic than others. Like, for example, people who don't have a lot of options, if they don't have a lot of education, or for whatever other reason, it wouldn't be easy for them to get another job or to figure out something else to do in a pinch. So, those are some people who had prior financial setbacks, people who have friends or family who were in the Great Depression, of 1929, 30, and so on, who already have had a fear from that time of, those are like the hoarders. A lot of the hoarders are people who were involved in the Depression because they want to hold on to everything, anything might have value. And it's good to make plans, like what could you do if you needed to make extra money? Could you move in with somebody? Could you take in a person into your apartment or house to make money? Then also children, it's we don't want children to panic because first of all, it's so confusing for us. The media, I mean, every day I look to see what's the latest on, with the banks. And of course, I mean, most people probably do that too. That's another thing. We shouldn't look at that when it gets too close to bedtime,
Yeah.
because
Got to turn it off.
otherwise you won't be able to sleep. That's right. You can't turn it off. But the news is so confusing. And you get one thing one day, Yellen says one thing one day, and then she says another thing another day. And one of the things, though, that is a little worrisome, kind of in the same vein as some of the other things we were talking about, with how culture wars and so on. I started thinking about how this could be. Well, first of all, the people in SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, and Signature Bank, well, particularly SVB, they only had one person on their board who was a real expert in money and banks and all of that. The other people had these weird backgrounds, and they were all connected, or each of them was connected in some way to either Obama or Nancy Pelosi, or the left side, the left side, yeah. And I started thinking, and Biden, of course, and I started thinking about how maybe this isn't just a coincidence. I mean, yes, of course, there are lots of things that went into this, and again, I'm not a financial expert, but I mean, it's very poor planning. They didn't even have a risk manager for almost a year, so there's all kinds. They were too interested in being woke, and not paying enough attention to their people's money, the people who gave the money to the bank. But I started thinking about how it could well not be a coincidence and not a surprise, because this would go along with so many other things that are trying to make Americans poor. so that we would be dependent upon government handouts, in other words, socialism. If they can make us poor enough, then everybody or the majority of the people will be desperate and want to go into socialism because we want to eat. What do you think about that?
It does seem to be that CBDC, central bank digital currency, is really just the current manifestation of that age old idea of if you know, I guess metaphorically and sometimes literally rape and pillage the population, and you are so destitute for it's not that you can't afford a pool or that maybe you gotta get a minivan instead of a decked out Escalade, but if you actually take away everything to where you don't, you know, you need food stamps and you need the heater on, and there's only one game in town that can provide that, the government. This is this is as old as humanity itself, is that people in power do that. It corrupts absolutely, and that is often a tactic to use. Is if you can't get them to do it at their own free will, you manufacture some sort of disaster to where the only response is big daddy government. And that doesn't mean every response from the government is. I mean, sometimes shit just happens. Hurricane Katrina, National Guard. I mean, I don't think that was engineered. I think sometimes just sucks. Life just sucks. But something like this, it does seem that it does seem manufactured. It does seem, and I only say it because we're coming off the heels of other modes of totalitarian control. The
Mm-hmm.
the what is it? The government governance disinformation board to actually,
Yeah,
judge disinformation, or vaccine passports. I mean, we've seen just in the last 3 years, those right there are two examples of the government wanting to clamp down and control your movements and your speech. Like they're showing us who they are. And I don't think that's too absurd to assume that A, they're engineering this to usher in a digital currency, or B, and maybe I'm open to it, maybe this is all happening organically. They're still going to take advantage of this crisis. That's kind of my 2 cents on that.
yes, yes, I agree with you. And maybe, the fact that all these people in SVB Bank, SVB, the fact that they're so connected to Obama and Biden and all of that, isn't a coincidence. In other words, there would have been influence from the Obama Biden White House to be able to make this bank fall apart, if they had wanted to. So yes, these are certainly difficult times, which is another reason why we each have to make things in our own world, try to develop enough security in our own world amongst our friends and family and groups that we belong to and so on, to feel some little island of security in it, as a way of dealing with the outside world too. At least if you know that in this little place or with these people, you can talk about these things, and you can um, not feel like you're the only one going crazy. That everybody can share how they feel about these kinds of things and information that they have about these kinds of things. And of course, the latest craziness is the plan to arrest Trump.
Mm-hmm. On for everybody in the future, today is Sunday, March 19th, and he is allegedly going to be arrested on Tuesday, the 21st, correct?
That's what he thinks, and he said it came from a leak from from New York, from the DA. Or, I mean, it is just. I think that the Democrats or the left are running out of ways to try to stop Trump. I mean, I'm sure he had a good reason for announcing early that he was going to run, that he was running for 2024. But of course, now it gives the left, Democrats, a lot of time to try to make bad things happen to him. Um, but so for example, they started with banning him a while ago, with banning him from social media. They started with that, of course, January 6th. They used that to make January 6th, get people to believe that the so-called insurrection of January 6th was worse than 9/11, that we're all terrorists. And we don't worry about the radical Islamist terrorists, just worry about the domestic terrorists who are the people who are Trumpers. That's how they define a domestic terrorist. And then, of course, what else was there? Mar-a-Lago, the invasion of Mar-a-Lago. And so now they bring up Stormy Daniels. Now, if there was something really there, that they could have put Trump in jail for, they would have done that ages ago. They wouldn't have waited to now, but they're running out of things to try to stop him. And especially since, the polls are showing that he is ahead of all the Republican candidates. So as much as they want to say all kinds of bad things about him. So the other thing with that though is, so I mean, and why is it coming now? I don't think it's a coincidence that it's coming at a time when the investigations are getting closer and closer to exposing Biden's connection to China.
Hmm.
And so how do we distract people from this? We don't want, the Hunter Biden computer has been around now for what? It's been like over a year, and only the New York Post broke it or put it. The mainstream media didn't want to talk about his computer, but now even they are being forced to talk about it. And so, what do you do to get people to stop thinking about that? You arrest Trump. So it's really this is really getting to be like a banana republic. All these different things that we were just talking about, like you were mentioning, and I was mentioning, all these different things are things that happen in places where that aren't democracies, in places where you arrest the candidate, the opposing candidate. That is not supposed to happen, and it never has happened in America.
Yeah, this is pretty insane. We're definitely, it's no longer hyperbole to say we're reaching a kind of a communist fever pitch. In that, I mean, if we really wanted to arrest former presidents, George Bush would have done it to Bill Clinton for the ICBM um, intellectual property data that was allegedly given to the Chinese. Obama would have arrested George Bush for lying about weapons of mass destruction. Trump would have arrested Obama for, was it Operation Sycamore Timber, where we funded what would become ISIS, and for, I guess, droning a hospital. And then Biden would arrest Trump for whatever Trump did. But we haven't done that so far. And so all that tells me is that we have either reached a fever pitch where we are now arresting opposing candidates, and or it's that he's the only one that has stepped outside of the, and just logically, you don't have to like Trump. You can hate Orange Man. That's fine. But I'm just logically, how come no one else has been arrested despite Republicans or Democrats? Well, I think it's giving a little more weight to the idea that there is a uniparty and that all differences are merely theatrical and surface level. And we're seeing the one guy who just rationally, by this line of thought, you don't have to like him, that's fine, he's the one that has stepped out of line from the uniparty, and they are cracking down on that. That's my best thought.
Yeah, it boggles my mind how, I mean, there are a lot of people who well, I don't want to, I mean, some people, let's not say how many, but there are some people. I mean, even the fact that Biden supposedly won, the people weren't voting for Biden. They were voting against Trump. And it boggles my mind that people are so petty, or, people are jealous of Trump. People are jealous of not just his money and, his success and all of that, but they don't like the fact, some people don't like the fact that he tells it like it is. He isn't afraid. He goes out there and he has a love for America, and he's ready to do whatever it takes to try to preserve the country. And that some people are like intimidated by that or jealous of that. And it just bothers me because it's like, don't they see that we need someone like this to be able to take back our country that is just flowing away from slipping away, day by day, slipping away as more of these crazy things go on, like in even in hospitals or in the medical education, medical establishment, where they're saying that you have to use certain pronouns and so on. In medicine, I mean, that talk about crazy or things not making sense. How can you doctors, call men women and women men? It just it even so, and even doctors being taken over by, wooed by this craziness. Like, isn't anyone intelligent enough and I'm not saying that doctors are the most intelligent people, but you know what I mean. um no one seems to be able to stand up against this craziness.
Yeah, I mean, and if people didn't vote for Biden, but rather voted against Trump, as much as I don't like that idea either, you are still free to do that. You're allowed to vote for whoever. There
Yeah.
seems to, yeah, and yeah, but there does seem to be a psychosis surrounding him that all tradition and all, I guess, normalities can be thrown out of the window, that like we're going to arrest this president, and there's some delusional, intoxicating take that America is so exceptional that we are immune to repeating the mistakes of the past. And I love this, as the flag behind me says, I love this place. But there's this idea that we won't slip into dystopia, that we
Mm-hmm.
won't slip into Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia, that we won't fall into that. But we are no different. We are ultimately, I mean, if there's ever been a place with a sampling of all humans from all areas of Earth, it's America.
Uh-huh.
Thus, we are just as, if not more likely than any other place, to have a non-zero probability that we will also fall into the same mistakes those past empires have made. And it's it's easy to feel disconnected from, Nazi Germany, because it's black and white and they're in these weird big shiny cars, and yeah, that's not now, where it's I can order Taco Bell and have it delivered to my house and get on Snapchat. But we're still the same people with the same brains, and we will, if we do not heed from the past, we will slip into the same hellscapes that has plagued the past before. And I think above all else, there does seem to be a delusion that we are somehow above that it won't happen here. But we are no different from any other aggregation of people in any other area of land throughout all of human history. And that's kind of my fear of that.
Well, you mean having sort of normal human frailties.
Yeah.
uh, yes, and I think that people, that people feel that there is that we're sort of complacent in that we think we're going to have all these freedoms and so on forever. And I think that that's why it took a while for us to wake up to what really has been going on. We started waking up when the whole George Floyd event happened, and the protest, the riots happened, and so on. And then things, and also with the pandemic and kids watching their teachers on Zoom. So parents got to see what they're being taught and so on. So all of this seemed to happen really rather quickly, all at once, and the statues being toppled and so on. But then when you look into it more deeply, this is actually has been going on insidiously for years,
Oh,
and
decades.
kind of became clearer in the last few years.
Yeah, it's been going on for decades, but it's just now it's here, right? It's hearing about a storm, a rainstorm coming, or hearing about a hurricane, versus when the sky actually starts to turn black and the windows start rattling, and oh shit. Oh,
Right.
it's actually here. Oh shit. And we have been seeing it for decades, and it's ultimately, I mean, to strip away all ideological labels from it, it ultimately comes down to self-hatred and a perversion of all that is traditionally human, not just American. That's kind of myopic, just traditionally human,
Hmm.
self-loving, just nuclear families. That seems to be the bane of existence for whoever's perpetrating this. It just everything else stems from that. You can call it communism or Nazism or socialism or Satanism or whatever you want. It is a self-hatred and a destruction of all that is good and holy in this world. And that's just if you really cut away all, trim all the fat. That's what it is. It's just it's self-hatred.
Well, but people aren't born hating
No.
themselves. You know, I mean, I think this has been part of the what's been happening with there are certain people who want us to have self-hatred so that they can, the World Economic Forum and so on, and so that people can rule us, or just on an American scale, the left. But so they're growing. They're like we're like in a petri dish, and they're growing this self-hatred, so that we can be more easily manipulated.
No, I agree
And
with that.
I don't think that we. I mean, I don't think that we. I don't think that we sort of naturally have that, but it is very easy to fall into that. As a matter of fact, even from 9/11, to a large degree, that contributed to us feeling like abused children, feeling guilty or feeling like we're bad, or that had a big effect on us. That really hasn't been talked about very much, but that I think you can trace, you can trace it back decades, but that was one of the points certainly where it made us feel vulnerable,
Mm.
and we don't like feeling vulnerable.
I haven't heard that theory before. I get the vulnerability. I was 11 when it happened, so I don't remember too much of it. But well, I remember it. It's just it's hard to place it into. I'm 32 now. It's hard to I guess visualize it now. But I hadn't heard. Could you maybe I guess explain that a little more? The idea of self hatred or the idea that we're bad stemming from 9/11. I get the vulnerability thing. Just the first part, I'm not sure I entirely. I haven't heard before at the least.
Well, it's like, I mean, certainly I mean, there are some conspiracy theories about 9/11, and I'm not talking about that because I don't believe those conspiracy. I don't think we did 9/11. There
Sure.
really are radical Islamist terrorists, and we know for a fact which ones perpetrated 9/11. So we didn't do it to ourselves. Um, but there's a feeling, it's interesting that because you would be part of the generation, kids growing up. I've talked about this before. Kids growing up in the shadow of 9/11, seeing their parents react to 9/11,
Hmm.
parents feeling anxious and feeling scared and feeling worried and feeling helpless. Um, that has made, um, obviously you must be an exception to it, I guess, but that has made a lot of those children who were growing up then, either who were born soon after 9/11 or who were already alive but children during that time, they would have, and you tell me if this resonates with you at all, um, absorbed some of that helplessness, and would feel, again, obviously not you, but would feel, be more inclined towards wanting a socialist
Hmm.
uh, country, having Big Daddy take care of us, because it felt like we were so vulnerable, and surprised, and how what's happening here, so sort of nothing like this had happened before in America. So I think it gave those children more of a sense of needing daddy or mommy, needing somebody to take care of us. And I think that's why, of course, it's been education in the schools, and high schools and middle schools and colleges, of course, are crazy these days, with what they're teaching students. But I think it made, the Bernie Sanders, for example, of the world. Why were there so many young people attracted to Bernie Sanders? Because there was a kind of protection that seems to be offered in a government like that.
No, I think I was absolutely one of those kids. I mean, who knows how much of it's subconscious and that I haven't just acknowledged yet, even though it's been 20 years. I mean, I remember right after it though. I mean, I remember the day of. I remember went to a private Catholic school outside of Atlanta, and I remember they came on and they like shut down all the private schools, and all the parents came and picked us up, and like all the moms were crying, and it was just like the parents, your invincible parents, are visibly upset and shaken, and you're 11, you're like, what the hell's going on? And I remember going home and watching on repeat the planes hitting the towers. I remember watching George Bush like talking in the rubble. I don't remember if that was the next day or whatever. Um, and then I remember them kind of coming out and saying like there's going to be a war on terror. And I was just thinking about this the other day of how simple logic is when you're a kid. I
Mhm.
vividly remember them explaining like the war on terror and how it wasn't just going to be Afghanistan, but we were going to go throughout the whole world and erase all of terrorism. And as an 11-year-old, I just remember thinking like, good, we're taking the gloves. And I look at that now and I'm like, that is an asinine idea. Like you can do surgical strikes, occupations often don't work unless you're going to like carpet nuke anyone. You really can't take on the whole world, and the amount of money that takes, and these civil liberties that are eroded at home through the Patriot Act, through Echelon, X Key Score, Stellar Winds, all the NSA domestic programs. But it's taken me, 20 years to mature to that idea. But by then, the whole thing's already happened. We did the 2-decade occupation and have left. But at the time, when you're a kid and your brain is still forming, there is that, even as someone who, grew up in a conservative household, whether you acknowledge it or put a label on it, there is that feeling of daddy government's going to come in, the big, strong mill, Department of Homeland Security. We're going to find them. We're going to kill them. They attacked freedom itself. And, you're 4 feet high and you're like, yeah, we're going to go get rid of the evil. And yeah, I wonder how much of that has still, it's probably still inside me, that wants someone to take care of me, that doesn't want to grow up on my own, right? I think we all approach this as you get older. You're like, oh, am I the adult now? I don't want to be the adult now. But
Mhm.
I think that's probably it. And as you see more things kind of go to shit, there is no border, our food processing plants, our entire supply chain, our domestic infrastructure, we're sending all these weapons to Ukraine. Inflation is just ruining the dollar, vaccine mandates, government censorship. There is just this infantilism where you're a kid and you want to cry and you say, someone come pick me up and
Right.
put me to bed and make it all better. And the problem is the people who are making you feel that way are also the people who are going to come to the rescue. There's not a bad guy that's going to be wiped out by a good guy. There's a guy parading as a good guy that is also doing all this shit to make you want the white knight to come in.
Yes. Now we do have to, Joe, though, separate out, do make a distinction between, there was something really good about, for example, after 9/11, all the people who joined
Sure.
the military because of patriotism. So there is a fine line, but patriotism is good, and I'm not against the fact that we went to Afghanistan and we did the war on terror. I think,
Oh, I'm not
uh,
either. I'm not either. Just for clarification. No,
okay,
I'm
okay,
friends with a lot. I've interviewed of most of the special forces guys that like spearheaded that stuff.
okay,
It's
great.
it's the much larger picture of
Yes.
everything can be cured by a nonstop military campaign that just goes on forever.
Uh-huh. Well, okay. I mean, that's not everything can be cured by that, but my only, I just want to, I'm very concerned with the fact that people have gone the other way.
Sure.
A lot of people have thought, oh, we don't need to worry about that anymore. And actually Europe, for example, is has been overrun by migrants. There's a lot of terror attacks. We don't really hear about it in mainstream media, but there are a lot of things going on, a lot of rapes all the time by migrants. In fact, in America, I was talking earlier about how we're in greater danger. One, because we have a president who has dementia. I warned about that from when he was running, when he was in his basement, when Biden was in his basement running. I did a lot of media talking about how he has encroaching dementia and warning him. Yes, of course, I wanted Trump to be elected, but it wasn't just because of that. I didn't want someone with encroaching dementia to be elected president. We have seen the results of that. And but so now I lost my train of thought. I started thinking about Biden and
Uh,
his
military
dementia.
military occupation, the good guy, the bad
Oh,
guy.
right,
There's
right.
the
Okay. So oh yeah, why we were in more risk. We took 80,000 Afghans into America. Biden brought them in. And because of the situation at the time, the horrendous exit, which is partly due to, or largely due to, his encroaching dementia. He couldn't handle more than one plan in his mind at a time. And when that started falling apart, he couldn't switch to a plan B or C. Um, and so that, and the fact that now they have all our equipment, our weapons, they're learning how to use it. I was trying to say about the Afghans. And so now that is, and of course, yes, some of them were people who did help the troops in Afghanistan, but there were so many that slipped through. There was really no vetting, and so many that slipped through, along with the terrorists who are slipping through on the southern border. There is going to be a renewed attention. In fact, just this past week, there were a lot of different stories about terrorists and what they're doing, and how how different things that draw your attention to the fact that they have not gone away, and there's going to be a renewed resurgence. My latest book is called Lions and Tigers and Terrorists, Oh My, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror. And it's a book, the first half of it is for grown-ups, teachers and parents and so on. And that's like written like a regular book. And the second half is a picture book. And it's like Terrorism 101 light for kids, with Osama and the shoe bomber, and all the high points or low points, however you want to look at it, about terrorism, because kids need to understand this. And so um, and I was in London with that book, and Paris. It won all kinds of awards and so on. And it seemed during the pandemic that we maybe didn't have to worry about terrorism anymore. But as I was saying earlier, in fact, that was a time of rejuvenation of different Al Qaeda, ISIS K. That was one of the things in the news this week about ISIS K, how that was really rejuvenating itself. So it is going to be, I'm not saying there's going to be another 9/11, but we certainly have not seen the end of other kinds of terror attacks.
and to kind of touch on the war on terror, it's as with everything, of course it isn't as black and white as, you know, they want to scare you so that you beg for government help. We
Right.
also don't live in a vacuum. We are 5% of the world's population. We live in a world where the vast majority, I guess not majority, a massive percentage live on $1 a day or don't have access to clean water. Or if they live in a second world country, it's still worse than any city in the US. It's not a nice world. And I haven't never served in the military, but I don't have any starry eyed illusions about the world. I've interviewed enough of these guys who have operated in 80, 90, 100 countries, or intelligence guys. Excuse my French, but I know how fucked the world is. So it's also not as easy as the government's trying to scare you. There's also genuine organic terror. And if it's not terror, state backed terror. Russia, China, Iran, Turkey. Like, it's not a nice world. And the world is ruled by guns and weapons and bombs, and that's the dark reality. Is we're not all holding hands. It's whoever has. There's a reason why no one attacks us, and it's not because they're nice to us. It's because we have a bigger military than the next 9 people combined. Like I don't have any delusions about that. So just as my own clarification, like I also get that it's not a fun world where we're all happily playing in the sandbox together. It's a very chaotic king of the jungle-esque world. I just
I
need to make my own clarification on that.
I agree with you, but the only way out of that or up from that is for each of us to try every day, like we were talking about earlier, to make it better, both in our personal world and doing something on a grander scale to wake people up to what is really not good, what really has to change, what really can't take over. I think a metaphor, it kind of says it all. The Norman Rockwell paintings. I love Norman Rockwell paintings because that's, Americana. That is the heyday of America. And Biden recently took down the Norman Rockwell paintings in the White House. And that really, he was trying to say,
Symbolic.
yes, we don't want you to remember that. Forget about those days. Where it's going to be my way now. It's going to be like this. And that is just really sad.
That's depressing. But so as not to end this podcast on a depressing note,
Yes,
as a psychiatrist, can you leave? I would like to say my audience, but more selfishly, can you leave me with any positive piece of advice or positive
sure.
outlook, or just make it a little less bad?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, you deserve kudos for what you're doing. I
Thank
think
you.
that's number one. You can feel proud of yourself for trying all the time to be making this world into a better place. That's the most important thing. And to be a model for other people, both on a large scale and in on a more personal scale, maybe helping your contemporaries or your children, with trying not telling them about all the guns and war and so on, but inspiring them to work hard to keep America the way it was meant to be, the way it has been, and to start appreciating things like even just the flag and like what you have. I want to bring back the Pledge of Allegiance to schools. That is something that I hope to do in the future, because that is something that it's really had a very deleterious effect on the world, on America. I mean, on America's world, because when we used to raise pledge allegiance and sing, songs, sing patriotic songs to start the day like that. When I was growing up, that's how we started the day, and there was something so calming. And you do that. That was one way to not feel anxious and to feel like we're all in this together, and we want America to be great, and we're all we're all going to help each other, kind of thing. And I think that and now I don't know the exact statistics, but I know it's missing in a lot of schools, and that's a big hole. We need to fill that again with the pride.
And yeah, so self-love is,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I think it's an uphill climb. Maybe it's just my own anxiety today kind of bursting through the seams, but no,
Yes,
I
I
think
know. I didn't do much to help your
no, you
anxiety.
did. No, you did. I dig my own holes. Trust me. If it was really bad, I would have canceled all the shows. No, it's all self-inflicted. There's no one to feel sorry for. It's my fault. Um, but no, it did help. It's because ultimately the only way through it is to walk through it. I could have gone to sleep and taken a nap. That'd be great for a little bit, but then I'd wake up and it'd still be there. So I mean, ultimately you have to pay the bill. You have to pay the anxiety bill, and the only way to pay it is to go through whatever it is that's making you anxious.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
no, it's this had to happen. So thank you for helping me walk through it. But Dr. Lieberman, I'd love to have you back on here sometime. We got to wrap this one up, but in the
Sure.
description is your website, your Twitter, both your podcast, and again, the greatest name ever, the Terrorist Therapist. That truly is. I don't know what I'm doing with Tommy's podcast. That's such a better name, the Terrorist Therapist. Um, but Dr. Lieberman, thank you so much for your time, and I'll email you this episode. I'll email you the link, and I'd love to have you back on here.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching, guys.